Hi. Okay. I was like, wait, I thought you were over there. I was like, wait, just run downstairs. I don't want to introduce her prematurely. Rachel Myslivy is someone I had the pleasure to meet through THAD, and I'm very excited about her presentation, which is, I think, almost a response to what Jeremy said about putting this work and these questions into action. So I'll just keep it that way and you take it away. Thank you.
Okay, as we've all heard throughout the day, one of the guiding principles of the Christian traditions is the concept of helping others, especially those less fortunate than ourselves. We've seen this quote from Matthew several times today, and I won't read it all, I'll just summarize. Basically, he says, I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me a drink, and everybody around him is like, what are you talking about? We take care of you, you've never been hungry, you've never been thirsty. And he looks at me and he says, truly I say to you, just as you did to the least of my people, that you did to me. Ever since I was a child, I remember hearing a version of this song in Mass, and I'll spare you the torture of my singing. But it essentially says, whatsoever you do to the least of my people, that you do unto me. And this song in particular has served as a constant reminder for me of what it's all about, why we're here, and what we need to do. It is as if Jesus grabs you by the shoulders, looks you square in the eye, and says, no, really, I'm serious. It is not beyond the stretch of most Americans to think about providing food for those less fortunate. Everybody here has probably donated to a food pantry, or volunteered in a soup kitchen, or participated in a food drive, or even just made meals for a sick friend, something like that. The concept of donating food is pretty common in mainstream America. But what about waste? I'm sure you've all heard the excuses. Oh, I don't like the way it tastes. I'm full. The package says it's expired. Oh, my eyes are bigger than my stomach. How can we justify throwing away food when so many, as we've heard from these presentations, so many people are so hungry? I have tried to address these issues, and generally it's not very well received. How would you have liked it if at the lunch today I would have said, aren't you going to clean your plate? It's really good food. At least they compost it downstairs. The old children are starving in some third world country just doesn't really work so well. And in light, no offense, your presentation was great. In light of childhood obesity, the epidemic of childhood obesity, this type of education is particularly unacceptable in schools. You just can't tell a child to clean your plate, and frankly, at this point, we don't want to do that. So we take more than we can eat and we throw it all away. According to the US EPA, the amount of food wasted in the United States is staggering. After seeing the numbers, I'd say that this is an understatement. In 2010, 40% of the food that was produced was wasted. This equates to about 34 million tons of food wasted every year. Food waste is the single largest component of municipal solid waste reaching landfills and incinerators. It accounts for about 14% of total municipal solid waste. The fact that so much food is wasted is a standalone problem, but it's just the beginning. What does all this wasted food cost us? The production, packaging, and transportation of discarded food wastes water, energy, and chemicals, and contributes to global warming pollution. Nearly all of the wasted food ends up in landfills, where it undergoes anaerobic or without oxygen decomposition, and releases methane, a heat-trapping greenhouse gas that is 21 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Consider these cost estimates of all the food that never gets eaten in the United States, and imagine just how much we could save by wasting less food. 25% of all fresh water used in the United States, 4% of total U.S. oil consumption, $100 billion a year, and $40 billion of that is from households, and $750 million a year just to dispose of the wasted food, which equates to that 33 million tons in the landfills. But what about the human costs? If we reduced consumer waste by 20%, we could feed 25 million people. You just need to think about that. As is often the case, it is easy to be disturbed by things, in theory, or to just know that there's a problem but not really know how to fix it, or even just to be so overwhelmed by all the things that you can't fix in the world that you just don't know what to do. And sometimes I think, as the last speaker was saying, it's helpful to bring things down to the local level. Has anyone here ever eaten lunch at a school? Okay. You notice the amount of the waste there? Well, I joined my lovely daughter, who's back there, Willa, for school on occasion. And I was shocked at how little the kids ate. I was shocked. I would sit at a table with 7 or 8 other kids and nag them the whole way through about finishing their dinner. I used all of the momisms, you're going to be hungry later, or why don't you try just a bit of that? But the reality was that the kids would nibble here and there, talk most of the time, and take full plates of food and throw the whole plate straight into a black plastic bag. I remember just standing in shock, looking at this trash bag at the end of the meal and shaking my head. We threw food away, and we threw a lot of it away. And I didn't really know what to do. I was really disturbed by it, but what are you supposed to do, right? Children are starving everywhere. Luckily, I have learned over several failed attempts at effecting change, and confronting a problem head-on is not the best way. And standing on a soapbox and waving your fist doesn't always work. So now, instead of saying, you need to think about this, or you need to do that, I think, what can I do? What can I do? And it has served me pretty well. As a farmer, I am keenly aware of the beauty and wonder of composting. You take what would otherwise be trash, and you watch it magically transform into soil. We compost everything at home, or feed it to our livestock. We pick up the compost from the Merck Deli twice a week. Why couldn't we do that at the school, too? So, I brought up the idea with Mrs. Dorothy Malsbury, the Director of Food Service, and her assistant, Kathy Nickel, at St. John's Catholic School. It's where my daughter goes to school. It's my community. Turns out, as is often the case, that I was not the only one struggling with this problem. We all agreed that there was a problem with the waste of food in the cafeteria, but we didn't really know what to do. We had no solutions. Composting offered us an "at least we can do that" option. At least we can keep the food from the landfill. So we collaboratively developed a simple plan for pickup, and we started composting. According to the EPA, again, reducing, recovery, and recycling food waste diverts organic matter from landfills and incinerators, reducing greenhouse gas emissions from landfills and waste combustion. The use of recycled food waste for compost has many environmental benefits, such as improving soil health and structure, increasing drought resistance, and reducing the need for supplemental water, fertilizers, and pesticides. The EPA has a great conceptual framework for addressing food waste that I located while preparing for this presentation. You can see that way down on the bottom is the landfill, and just above that is composting. Composting really is the least you can do to keep food from the landfill. Then as you move up the hierarchy, you see the measures that have a stronger impact. There's diverting food to industrial uses like oils for fuels or animal feed production. And then above that is a great option to partner with farmers to provide food scraps for animal feed. And in fact, much of the waste or the food scraps from St. John's do go to our animals. And it was a great way to get the kids on board because they like the idea of, oh, this might feed the chickens or whatever. Excuse me. Above that is feeding people, which is basically donating excess food to food banks, soup kitchens, and shelters. And I'm going to get on a soapbox here for just a second, and then I'll get off. This is something I think we all neglect in our daily lives. If you have a conference like this one today, or a wedding, happens at weddings all the time, or maybe a staff meeting, whatever, and you have a lot of food that wasn't eaten, that wasn't even touched. I mean, how many of you have seen that food just go directly into the trash because nobody wanted to be bothered to take it to the shelter? And I would say just start being the person who volunteers to take it to the shelter because they're always really glad to have it. Anyways, now I'm off that soapbox and back to what I can do. So the action with the most impact towards reducing food waste is, of course, source reduction. Reduce the amount of food wasted, or the amount of food waste that is being generated. So remember this, and we'll come back to it shortly. Now, when we started talking about composting at St. John's, we didn't know any of these numbers, we didn't know anything. We just knew that there was a problem. So we set about to set up a plan. And all in all, it wasn't that difficult to implement. The most important thing is that the compost was picked up every day. So it doesn't really work to store the compost in a refrigerator, especially where there's limited space most of the time. So I volunteered to pick up the compost every day, and then I would bring the buckets, clean buckets back the next morning. And I always took the long way around the school. I walked as much as I could with those buckets so people would know what I was doing. I was trying to raise awareness of the program. And it took some time to figure out the best method for the kids who are generally, shorter than we are. The 5-gallon buckets, they're like this big, were too tall when you put them on a table. So Dorothy and Kathy persevered, and they identified a good solution, which is those gray buckets they're shorter and you set them on a table, so the kids could reach them easier. Additionally, the compost bins on our farm were quickly overwhelmed and needed to be enlarged. And if you'd like to hear more about this side of the equation, you can talk to my darling husband back there, who did all of the work. I just carried the buckets. Once a system was in place, it was not difficult to maintain. Most importantly, it became second nature very quickly. And I think that everyone at the school, or everyone who was a part of it, would agree that we were feeling pretty good about things at this point. As Dorothy said, with the kids, it provided a great teaching experience. It taught them to quit throwing food away. It was generally reaffirming, but changing habits, it takes a while when you have 200 kids. Some catch on quickly, and others need constant reminding, just like our own kids. We felt that we were doing a good thing by keeping all of that food out of the landfill. However, it was now completely impossible to ignore just how much food there was in those buckets. And here's the bad news. There were at least 2 completely full 5-gallon buckets of food wasted every day. It was the equivalent of anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds of food a day. Occasionally the buckets were over 70 pounds, and I could barely get them to my car. It felt good to be composting, but the amount of waste was staggering. And I would like to point out here that sometimes the smallest of actions set off a chain reaction. People, for the most part, don't believe that food waste is an issue. As Jonathan Bloom put it, people don't pay attention to their food waste because it goes straight into the garbage or the disposal. It's not like newspapers or recycling or whatever that stocks up in the garage. And it's just like the old saying, out of sight, out of mind. Well, for us at St. John, the composting program brought the issue of waste front and center, and we couldn't ignore it anymore. So Dorothy and Kathy and I would often comment about the waste. And as we reflected back on the early days, Dorothy said, and I don't know if you can see that up there or not, but it said it was shameful, it was sinful, the amount of food wasted. It was very upsetting to me. I don't like seeing waste like that. And Kathy added, it was disgusting. I hated seeing food in the garbage cans, but when you put it all together like that in the compost, it just reinforces how much more was thrown away. It was disgusting. I think we all really did know that there was a problem, but we really had no idea how bad it was. So as Pat Newton, St. John School principal, said, even though the staff worked very hard to provide healthy and delicious foods, not all of the students liked what they were served. It just happens, right? The waste became even more apparent when we began to collect discarded food for compost. We were shocked by the amount of food ending up in buckets. Again, we just really didn't know what to do. We knew that it wouldn't work to lay a guilt trip about starving children. We could not require the kids to clean their plates, and we couldn't consider cutting their rations. So Dorothy and Kathy started looking at the root causes of the problem. And I think that the course that we followed is broadly applicable in addressing issues of social change. The first step was to raise awareness, which we did through the composting program and our discussions about the waste. And my part of the story really ends here. We continued composting, but really, the heroes of the story are Dorothy and Kathy, my favorite lunch ladies. They tackled the next two steps, which were much more difficult and were completely beyond my ability. The second step was that we needed to identify the root causes of the problem. Why were the kids throwing away this high-quality, freshly prepared food? Food that was prepared with love, I might add. They determined that the problem was really the way that they were serving the food. So remember back when we were looking at that triangle graphic and with the waste reduction measures, and I said we'd come back to the issue of source reduction? Here we go. As Dorothy said, at that time, this was, when we were seeing all this waste, we were doing the SERVE program. So the kids had to take what we gave them. If they didn't like it, they wouldn't eat it and it would be thrown away. So the next step was to make changes, which these ladies did with gusto. They checked with the Lawrence Public Schools lunch director and visited a school with a similar program. And then Dorothy and Kathy worked with a woman, Peggy McAdoo, the Kansas Department of Education representative, and came up with a plan that would work for our school. They designed the OFFER program, presented it to the school board, and set off into the unknown, and it has been a fabulous success. With the OFFER program, the kids choose from a variety of options, and they create their own meals in accordance with USDA requirements by selecting dots that represent the various food groups. The students are now allowed to select the foods that they want for lunch as long as their choices fulfill the nutritional requirements. We immediately saw a huge reduction in the amount of food thrown into the compost bucket. I mean, it was immediate. And I remember, I'll never forget the first bucket. The day after they started, it was like this little tiny bucket, and they had drawn a smiley face on it. They were so happy. So the kids caught on quickly, and the unforeseen opportunities to educate the kids have been great. Dorothy commented, "You see the kids thinking about the food and making better choices. The kids love it. They like to be able to choose." And as Kathy said, teaching kids to think about what's on their plate is teaching them big lessons in nutrition. She's hopeful that this will teach kids how to build a healthy plate outside of school. And she commented that kids need to look at their hunger level and not eat with their eyes. They need to learn to eat with their stomach. The OFFER program gives us a good avenue to work on issues relating to childhood obesity. Additionally, opportunities arose to increase awareness of food in general. We were surprised that kids would say things like, "Is pork meat?" Or "Is chicken meat?" It's poultry, but does that mean it's meat? Because we weren't composting meat. The OFFER program encouraged these types of questions and fostered learning. It is teaching the kids where their food comes from and how to make healthy choices. So Mrs. Newton, again the school principal, she summed it up best when she said, "The nutritional education and the ability to choose resulted in healthier lunches, far less waste, and a financial savings for the school lunch program." And there were certainly financial savings. We compared the lunchroom expenses from January through March of 2011, or before the OFFER program, to January through March of 2012, after the OFFER program was fully implemented. And we saw a savings of $2,033. For this school year, which would be the same kids, the same cost of food, everything, we looked at the 3 months of before the SERVE program, followed by 3 months after, and we realized a savings of $3,557. And if you have any idea about school finances, that's huge. It's a huge savings. So this all equals an average of approximately $675 to $1,200 every month, and an average of over $8,000 saved over the course of a school year. And we do really believe that the savings will increase as the program stabilizes and kids know better what they need to fill themselves up. This is some serious money, that's a lot. And Dorothy and Kathy have several ideas for where that money could go, as I'm sure you can imagine. Currently, the school is expanding, so much of that excess will go to the building fund. But over the long run, the money can be used to offset the cost of higher quality food. And what made me so happy, they want to locally source food. They think that this money savings will allow them to buy from local farmers. Additionally, equipment purchases could increase the efficiency of the cafeteria. And now in terms of waste reduction, the implementation of the offer program reduced average waste from 50 pounds a day to about 10. Perhaps one of the least expected results of the program is that it helped the maintenance man's back. He told me, we went from 4 heavy garbage cans to 3 much lighter cans. It just goes to show that you never know what will come from your good intentions. Additionally, the offer program has reduced the need for additional packaging in the cafeteria. As one school parent related, I'm so impressed with the changes to the food at St. John. It seems they are beginning to experiment with fewer paper boats too. Dorothy hopes to reduce the amount of plastics used in the cafeteria as well. The composting program was so easy to do, we expanded it to include the Lenten dinners, which further reduced the waste of food for our community and also increases awareness. And now it's so great. You go to the school lunch and you see the kids teaching their parents how to sort food for composting. It's really cool. So another unexpected result, which is probably maybe one of my favorites, is that Dorothy and Kathy have become converts to composting. As Kathy explained to me, when I was cooking at home, it was like, where's my bucket? Oh yeah, I'm at home. It honestly became second nature, and I started thinking I really needed to be doing it at home. They are educating themselves on the issues and expanding their horizons. Dorothy commented, after doing it here, it's just habit, it's second nature. We both went to the city of Lawrence and bought our composting bins and started stealing all of your compost, which is true. We're not getting anywhere near as much as we used to. When I asked about the biggest success of the program, Dorothy related, I feel green. Seriously, I feel like there's a purpose for that banana peel now. It's not just going in the trash. There's a purpose. It's going to help another plant grow. It's the cycle of life. And she continued on. It did not make me feel good seeing waste like that. There are hungry kids in China, sure. There are hungry kids in America. There are hungry kids in this city. It was gluttonous. I'm so much more pleased with this offer program because they're only taking what they want. The waste, it wasn't right. It just wasn't right. And maybe the biggest thing that is immeasurable is that now approximately 200 kids see the difference between trash and food. And you really do have to start somewhere. So, at the end here, I'd like to edit my title thusly. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat, provided adequate portions, composted the waste, addressed the source of the problem, and expanded your understanding of the issues. And I hope that you all will leave here thinking, why aren't we doing that? So, thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to listen.
I'm wondering if you saw any physical effects on the kids, eating less or something like that. There's a lot of reasoning, but that's kind of a hard thing to measure. Did you notice anything about it?
You know, that's a really good, he was asking if we noticed any changes in basically the weight of the children because they
general health.
or general health. And I wouldn't be the best person to answer that because I see my child and she's quite thin regardless. But that's a great thing for me to ask the people at the school. I know that they're hoping to expand the nutritional education programs through their health classes next year as a part of this. But I don't know, that's a great question. Yes?
It's have to adjust like how much they prepared so that there wasn't waste on that.
Yes, and I think that is when I said on the one slide about the savings, that is something that they had a hard time really knowing how much to prepare because it was a complete change in culture. Everything was different, and they're getting better about that. They're learning what the kids will eat and won't eat, and then they're great about repurposing things. So if they put fresh stuff out and it doesn't get eaten right away, then they'll make a soup with it or whatever. So yeah, they've had to do a lot of relearning in this.
Did they use any of the excess food for comments from the school?
No, they don't have a community garden at St. John, and there really isn't any space to have a composting bin. And I think that that's one of the things that I do hope people will take away from this presentation is, you know, I could have looked at it and said, well, they don't have any room for a compost, but I said, well, they don't have any room for a compost. I do. I'll take it home. And I think that I've heard so many times today, like, you have to do what you can do. And that was something that I could do. And one of the things that the lunch ladies commented that I thought was a great idea is that they said that there's obviously an opening here for volunteers or maybe a small business or something to partner with farmers who need compost and can use it, and schools or churches or, you know, other large food waste producing institutions, and work to link people up. And I'm hoping that, as I was talking to Nancy Thelman, that maybe the Douglas County Food Policy Council, they're talking about trying to implement composting in Lawrence. But I think that people do often think, oh, I don't have room. Well, if you don't have room, you find somebody who does and work with them. It's called community building. Does anybody else have any other questions? Great, well, thank you so much, and I do hope you walk away with a new perspective.